Welcome to
Crazy, right?
A podcast
Be your own person.
for those affected by
Crazy, right?
mental health,
I wanted to just try it.
Crazy,
It's something that I've struggled with for a while.
featuring live improvised music
Now I finally got my head right again.
by your host,
am I right? Crazy,
It feels good to talk about it.
right? Crazy, right?
Dave Asher.
My guest today is Anderson Lawfer. He is a producer, director, and event host. He was an artistic director of Straw Dog Theater Company for nearly a decade, and he is a proud recovering addict. Anderson, thank you for joining me here today in my studio. I'm going to step over here to my piano. Take me a little bit on the arc of what led you to seek treatment for addiction or join 12-step programs or anything of the sort along those lines.
Well, it was just, I could kind of measure that in these big episodes where I kind of fucked everything up,
What's one of those big episodes?
One time I was in London with my mother and my brother. We went to London for a vacation. And my brother and I decided to go out and check out the dance clubs. And I ended up scoring a little blow over there. And, after a while, my brother was like, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go back to the hotel. And I don't remember much after that, besides that I was in the hallway of the hotel, naked, screaming. And my brother basically had to knock me out to get me to settle down,
How long ago was this?
Oh, that was probably 2005, something like that.
And that, though, did not dissuade you.
Even that did not dissuade me.
What's the next binge you can recall? Of sorts.
I remember binging doing a play and falling asleep on stage as an actor.
In the middle of the show.
In the middle of the show.
What was the show?
Oh, I'm not sure I want to say.
That's fine.
But that was a rough one. I remember, during those days, towards, the end of my 20s, before I met my partner now, going to shows totally wasted.
Both on stage and watching them?
Yes, both on stage and after the show. I love something I've always loved is the community aspect of theater.
Right.
And so I would love partying after the show. And the partying after the show, if a show ends at 10:30 and everybody starts drinking and having fun, everybody goes to bed about midnight, 1, 2 a.m. I would not go to bed. I'd just go into the show the next night, having stayed up partying the whole time.
I had a similar experience. I lived in Amsterdam for 5 years and worked at a comedy show over there. And there was definitely an opportunity every night to go out dancing or ecstasy or weed all around everywhere. And I don't think I ever fell asleep on stage, literally, but I was certainly under the sleep of a fantasy many times.
Yeah. Oh man, I bet that was fun.
It was very fun.
Looking back on it, you can always remember fun moments from that stuff, and your brain kind of creates a blockade to, especially when you have addiction, it finds a way to block out the bad stuff.
Now I find, so you attend 12-step meetings, NAAA.
NAAA, and then private therapy as well.
Do you find, particularly with AA or NA, what is your reaction to when people share their glory stories, as it were, times when they...
Yeah, the war stories.
The war stories, yeah. What's your take on that?
Often I find it very annoying and an incorrect use of time, but the older I've gotten, I find it helpful to think about the good stuff that happened to you, or the times that you remember that were fun, and that you shared friendship and, you know, had relationships with people during that time. Because if you focus on the negative shit that happened during those years that you were, you know, a different part of yourself was in the forefront of your body, then it's hard to not just feel terrible about yourself, you know? There's something about taking like a good hard look at the way that you've behaved and the people you've hurt and the trouble that you've caused, without thinking that everything you've ever done is negative.
In your psychotherapy, do you find your therapist helps you find those positive attributes of yourself?
Yeah, he does. He's great. He also helps me try to find reasons why I have chosen the paths that I've chosen. You know, a lot of the stuff stems from childhood or from... when you keep in mind that it's an addiction and it's just a bodily disease as well. But there's a lot of nurture stuff in addition to the nature.
Would you go into some of that for me?
When I was a kid, when I was about 10 years old, my mother was in a really bad car accident. And she was hospitalized. She basically broke every bone in her body. And when that happened, I think I felt alone. And that caused a lot of my, you know, she was out for a couple years from that accident. And, you know, my father lived with his brother, who also had four sons, and then me and my brother lived there too, so it was just 8 men in a house, kind of with no rules or anything. So, you know, I had this like traumatic experience with my mother that I was fixing, or that I was, you know, my father was healing by keeping me in a house with 8 men with no rules, you know? So it kind of created this real chaos in my life that I just kind of got used to. And even when my life got back together, my mother got out of the hospital and was lucky enough to live through it and, you know, work again, and my father remarried, and, you know, I have this great family support system, but those years created this window of like chaos.
And so when you're deconstructing this with your psychotherapist, this chaos, what do they feel, what does he feel does he have an explicit, or in your understanding, an explicit connection of like situations in modern life in your current state to watch out for certain triggers as a result of this?
Yeah, I do have certain triggers that I look out for. One of them is success. That is a big trigger for me. And I think it's a trigger that a lot of people don't recognize in themselves, but it is a big trigger for a lot of people.
Does this mean when you achieve success, it triggers like a desire to celebrate? Or is it...
Yes, that's right. And also a desire to self-sabotage.
Would you...
You know,
yeah, please go into that.
I don't deserve it. I don't deserve this thing that I worked so hard for. It's something that I always have to go through in myself. Anytime I get a promotion in my job, or something great happens with my partner, or I spend a weekend with my family and I find out that I'm going to be an uncle, or any great thing that is part of the human experience that happens to you, for me, is a chance for me to tell myself that I do not deserve it. I've not earned it. Everyone's going to think I'm an asshole. And I should just go back to the hole I came from and use again.
When was the last time you did use?
2 years ago.
But you've felt these triggers many times since then.
Yep. And before, and 2 years ago, I had a situation where I got a job promotion and I used and basically ruined that job. But I had been sober for about 5 years before that, and years before that. So I go through these periods of sobriety, and the problem with being sober for a while is you forget that you're still addicted to it, Mm-hmm. You forget that your brain is constantly trying to lie to you and convince you you're not. So if you're sober for 2 years, you can't remember what it's like to have like a good high on. And so your brain tells you, your brain just tells you you're over that. You don't have to worry about that anymore, You got a promotion, everything's going good for you, so it's okay to have a glass of whiskey or to call a drug dealer,
How did you meet your partner?
We met working on a show together.
And what's the story there?
She was performing in a show. She was in rehearsal for the theater company I'm a part of. And I used to live above the theater. And I came down and I was watching a rehearsal and I saw her. Mm-hmm. And I had just gotten out of a relationship. And I think I was just thinking for somebody to mess around with for the night,
Right.
And she was so cute. And we started talking. She was hanging out after rehearsal and having a beer with everybody. We started talking. I went up to her and I told her who I was, and everybody told her, don't fuck around with it.
Right.
But we just hit it off. That was almost 12 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, but she saved my life.
Yeah, so she's been with you through a lot of ups and downs then.
A lot of ups and downs.
Has she struggled with addiction or mental health as well?
She does not. She does not struggle the way that I do.
What sort of connection have y'all had together with respect to your addiction and depression?
I try to be as open and honest with her as I possibly can be without making, I try not to put my issues on her back, But
Is that possible?
No, it's not. But, especially if you live with someone and you spend, your time with somebody that much time for that long, she knows. She can tell by looks on my face,
Looks that you might be jonesing or struggling, or in the
Yeah, or I'm
past that you
just-
might be using.
Yeah, or I'm sad, or I'm frustrated, and she has ways of talking to me that calm me down, or she'll say, "You need to call your sponsor," or "You need to go to a meeting," or something.
Mm-hmm.
Did you take your medicine?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Are you on antidepressants then?
I am. I'm on a antidepressant, and I'm also on a I forget what you call it. It's one of
Mood
those
stabilizer?
No, it's one of those addiction drugs for opioids and alcohol. It's called naltrexone, but it's
So it's meant to
cure urges, or cure
Okay.
I forget what
compulsion or
yeah. So they seem to work for me. I've been on them since the last time I used, and doing all right. cautiously optimistic.
Do you find that there is a particular aspect? Well, how did you first? You said you studied theater in school. What first led you to think that you might be a theater person? Do you have a moment when you can recall that?
Well, I was always a theater person, doing plays when I was a little kid. And then when I was 14, right before I went to high school, I got asked to audition for this community theater in the town I lived in, Louisville, Kentucky. And I went and auditioned, and I got cast in the show. And the guys there were these two guys who ran this theater, and they just seemed like they were having the best time. To me, they seemed like they were probably 29, 30 years old at the time. But to me, they, when you're 14, they seem like they're 50.
Right.
And they kind of took me in, and they said, hey, anytime you want to stay here, anytime you want to, if there's a play you want to do, if there's something that you want to do in theater, let us know, and we'll try to make it happen. So I spent 2 years at that theater. I did plays consistently throughout that time. They taught me how to build costumes, how to paint sets, how to build everything, how to dissect a play, and how to produce a play, how to hold auditions. They taught me all that when I was 14 years old. So by the time I was 16, the theater ended up shutting down. I took all that information, and when my high school was doing West Side Story or, any of the kind of big high school style plays, Our Town, shit like that, I was able to say, I don't want to do that. I want to rent space from you, my high school, and produce my own plays. And I'll hold bake sales and whatever I have to do to make my own shit.
Sounds like your experience with theater is as much about being an entrepreneur as it is about the artistic temperament of the human puppet that is an actor.
Yeah. I realized from that time that I do love being an actor, and I love playing a role in a show and all that, but I hate asking for permission to be in a play. I hate auditioning. And I had to, I think it was probably subconsciously in my 20s, but I tried to set it up so I would never have to ask anyone's permission. I can make my own shit.
What do you think was the subconscious baggage there that was causing you to fear the audition, the rejection potentially? What was the experience? What was the nurture part of that was causing that fear of auditioning or dread of it? Like subconsciously, you said that subconsciously you probably had a disposition against auditioning.
When I first moved to Chicago, there was this thing, I think it's still happening, called Sketchfest.
Yes.
Over at Stage 773. Mm-hmm. But at the time it was called something else. The Theater Building or something?
Right. Just the Theater Building on Belmont.
Yeah, Theater Building. And the first couple of years of first year Sketchfest, I was the stage manager. And for Brian Posen and that whole gang. Mm-hmm. And he and I really got along. Brian Peterlin, there was a bunch of guys kind of in that team. And after we were done, we were like, oh, let's do another show together. Mm-hmm. And I proposed this play that I really wanted to do. That was kind of this comedy cabaret thing. I wanted to direct it, and he was like, okay, let's do it, And then somebody else, one of his friends who was more famous than me, came in, found out we were doing it, and was like, I want to direct that. And he was like, oh, you can direct it, and co-direct it with Andy. And then I got fucking pushed out of my own thing that I was making, all the way out too. So by the end of that 2 weeks of negotiations on if I'm gonna assistant direct or co-direct or whatever, I got a phone call that was like, oh, actually, we're not going to use you at all for this play that you brought in.
Yeah.
And for me, that was it. I said, fuck this. I'm never asking anyone else permission ever again.
So that's a great. So you really got burned, and you really just said you're gonna take it yourself from there.
Yeah. And I still audition every once in a while, but it doesn't have the same weight to it, you know? I found out how to produce, and I found out how to direct, and I find value and much more, they're more meaningful for me. You know, concept creation is more meaningful for me.
Do you write as well?
Yeah, I do.
Have you ever written something that is connected to your experiences with addiction or depression?
No, I don't think I have. That's not something I really have ever been comfortable talking about. You know, this is the first time I've actually ever discussed it.
Literally this interview?
This interview right now.
So you do not, like your friends and family, they do not.
They know, but I don't, you know, they don't ask me about it a lot. But people in the community know that if they have an issue with addiction or are looking, you know, to kind of explore other options, that they're always welcome to reach out to me. I probably get 1 or 2 messages a month from people in the community who say like, hey, I think I'm having some issues with drinking, or, you know, I think my drug use is getting a little out of control. Could we maybe meet up and talk about, you know, how that worked out for you and what you've done? And
do you find that is part of being in recovery, is that service, that being a sponsor to somebody? Does that help your recovery to be a rock for other people?
I do think so. I don't even think of it like that, though. I think of it as just like being a part of the theater community more than anything else, you know? I don't even think of it as being part of the 12-step community.
Just a
lot of the 12
back.
Yeah, a lot of the 12-step community I'm not super interested in.
Is that at all connected to the concept of the higher power?
That is a big part of it. Yeah. I can't, there's the higher power that we all discuss and that maybe deep down I believe in somewhere. And then there's the Catholic higher power that is in AA meetings, you know? And they can say it's a higher power in whatever you believe, but then you have to say the fucking Lord's Prayer or some shit like that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Were you raised religious?
I was raised Episcopalian. And actually I wanted to be a pastor through most of my teenage years, because of the community that I saw in my church. But once I discovered theater and I saw that same community, that was the same value, and just didn't have to believe in something that may or may not be true.
So it sounds in a way like the theater is your church.
That's right. That's right.
If you had a message generally to people who are struggling with addiction, like as a platform here, would you, in the spirit of going to church, the theater church with me here, would you, particularly if I share in this or even take a little bit of a lead, if we were gonna make a song now about reaching out to people who are struggling with addiction and that they can rely on their church theater going brothers and sisters, what might that song be called? I'll get it started, then you just jump in if you want to.
I think Lean On Me is taken already. Isn't that the name of a song?
That is a proper song. I think the sentiment is certainly, you know, we could just sing a churchy version of Lean On Me.
Lean On Me. I'm trying to think of another.
like, what? How about we sing the spirit of "Lean on Me," but we improvise? I'm sure you've done. If you're in Chicago, you've probably done some improv at some point.
I used to teach improv for actors, but I've listened to your show and I've heard this song stuff.
Earlier in this interview, I was like, I don't think we're gonna do a song. I'm not sure if this is gonna say. And then like now, it's like maybe I can get Andy to do a song.
I was dreading the singing. I'm a hip hop guy.
Maybe I was pick. Oh, you're a hip hop guy?
But I'm an improv.
Not
an improv hip hop guy.
What if I sing? I'm gonna sing "Lean on Me" like a sample. Like, and then I want you to come in with a verse. Could be just a couple lines. Doesn't have to worry about rhyming. So
okay.
Like, let me try and get the right key here. I think.
Good Lord.
When you're not strong. Wait, no, so I was just like. So this is the sample.
Oh, okay.
Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on.
If you find yourself having too many beers after the show, if you find yourself staying up a little too late with some pills, if you find yourself asleep on stage, you can always reach out to us. We'll be here. We may not understand, and we may not care, but we can point you in the right direction of somebody who will.
Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend.
Sing it!
So, if there's a load that we can carry on. Take a verse, Danny.
I can't remember the words to Lean on Me. For you, somebody to lean on.
Great. I think we did a good job.
Yeah, that's pretty good. It's number one.
Well, what's something that you're looking forward to? Something specific.
Like a project?
Project, yeah.
I'm directing a play called Take Me right now at Straw Dog Theater.
Take Me?
Mm-hmm. It opens May 10th. It's written by Mark Guarino and John Langford from the Mekons and the Waco Brothers. And it's a musical about a woman with PTSD suffering from mental illness as well.
And you're directing this?
I am directing it, and I've been working on it for about 2 years.
Wow.
From the beginning, workshops, from just an idea, all the way to now. And it's going to be really fucking cool.
And along the way, you mentioned earlier that a trigger can be success. Do you feel, just even outside of addiction, get me a little bit into your head of that process of when you're working on something and you start to get those signs or instincts that it's going to be successful. What is your mental state like during those moments? Do you appreciate, can you enjoy it? The anticipation of success? Do you battle with that?
Yeah, well, I really I try to make myself super aware right away, you know, and it's something my therapist, my sponsor, everybody reminds me of. Like, this might go good for you. You know?
And to enjoy that and not freak out about it?
You know, for me, just identifying what it's going to be is the biggest thing, you know? If I can just see the road where the addiction's going to take over, if I can see it far enough out, then I can walk the other direction, you know? It's just when I'm not aware of it, that's what, you know, that's, in the past is what had happened. I'm like, oh, fuck, everything's great. I got nothing to worry about, you know? I'm having a great time. All of a sudden, I'm pulled over at some gas station, like drinking a fucking fifth of whiskey in the car, and I have no idea why or how I even got there, you know?
So you gotta really stay honest with yourself in the moment?
Yeah, stay honest with yourself and just understand, you cannot lie to yourself about what your problems are or what your triggers are, you know?
That honesty with yourself, what are the top 3 lessons you've learned about yourself as a result of that, being honest with yourself? Like if there's 3 things that over time you've been like, oh, that's a thing I just learned about myself, let me be honest about that. Whether it's, you know, for the process of like a 12-step, like a personal inventory, but like whatever, for yourself, like what are 3 things that are honest things about yourself that helped you grow, etc.?
Well, I guess I'll start with body image issues. You know, you start, when I was using every day, I was probably 100 pounds, 110 pounds, something like that. You know, when I first got sober, I replaced cocaine and alcohol with food, which is actually, you know, the more you learn, is actually a pretty healthy thing to do at the time, because you have to replace it with something, you know? Mm-hmm. It just doesn't go away. So, and I went from being completely emaciated to overweight in like 6 months, which was really like shocking for my body image, you know, to like look at myself in the mirror and see a different person. And ever since that, you know, it changes your metabolism, everything, and then you start getting older while you're trying to lose weight and, you know, change the way that you look, and you find out that it's not as easy as it... Apparently, dieting is not as easy as binging on cocaine in the weight loss.
Wow.
Spoiler. So, you know, it's like, that's a big thing, is coming to grips with the way that you look and looking at yourself and not seeing the person that you thought you were supposed to look like, you know? That is also a trigger, is seeing yourself and not liking what you see. So there's a lot of like acceptance and learning and stuff that you have to do with that kind of thing. So that's a big one.
And you feel now you're comfortable with your body? Most of the time?
Most of the time, I'd like to drop a few pounds, but it's not the thing that's going to kill me.
Do you in your mind think there is something that is going to? Do you have doubts that you're going to be able to maintain your sobriety?
I do not have doubts on maintaining my sobriety. I have doubts on... I have cautious doubts of maintaining my sobriety. Let me say that.
Is it something about depression?
Yeah, I mean, I am aware that relapse is always around the corner, you know?
Right.
So being aware of that, but trying to remember that all the time is what's the tricky thing to do, you know? Because if you forget it, then it's pretty easy to just kind of fall away.
Right. Do you have a lot of... I'm guessing you have a fair amount of close friends outside of your relationship?
Yeah, my theater family.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there people who and you mentioned you are there for people to talk to if they're struggling. Do you feel like you have people who you're on sort of even footing with that on? People who you've maybe were getting clean the time you were getting clean?
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple people in particular who I feel like I've gone down the same road as them at the same time, and it's made us closer. Or there's people who have known me every stage of the process, you know? There's people in my theater family at Straw Dog who knew me before I found cocaine, and then when I found cocaine, and then when cocaine was fun, and then when cocaine was terrible and almost life-ruining, and then who know me from when I was sober and when I met my partner and all the way up until now. You know, they've seen every phase of my adult life, basically, from the time I was 22 and came to Chicago till the time I'm almost 40. And I'm lucky to have people like that. You know, I'm lucky to have parents and siblings, you know, that kind of stuff as well, but they're not the people that you spend every day with and put your heart on the line for when you're making art, you know?
Well, Andy, I really appreciate you joining me here today.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
It's great chatting with you.
You're an awesome dude. That's a cool thing you're doing.
Thank you, man. Thank you again to Anderson Lawfer. You can listen to his morning Zoo-style podcast, The Game Show Show, on RadioMisfits.com, and he is directing Take Me, a world premiere musical by John Langford and Mark Guarino that opens May 10th at Straw Dog Theater Company. Take care, Anderson. All the best. That wraps up this episode of Crazy Right with Dave Asher. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider writing a review or rating this podcast. And of course, we would love it if you subscribe. I'm Dave Asher, and I'm glad to be here.